We have a panel discussion we are now going to do. I would like to invite our invited panel guests to come up and join us, please. The rope. We have Michael O'Leary and Theo Baccaro. Did I say that correctly? These gentlemen were involved in the narrative short film This Is Their Land that we are going to watch immediately following this panel discussion. So we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about your film before we go into it. Wherever you would like. We have Taylor Tupper, who is a member of Klamath Tribes. Thank you, Taylor, for being here. We have Ryan Bartholomew, who is a local historian who specializes in military history. Thank you, Ryan, for being here. Was Willa able to make it, or?
I don't believe so.
Oh, okay. We also have in the house representatives from Modoc tribes that are not joining our panel, but if there is a question specific to Modoc tribes, we may defer to them as well. I also want to give a very special thank you to the large contingent of Native Americans that we have in our audience. That's wonderful. Thank you very much for coming out. I believe we may even have some Klamath Tribal Council members here. I'm not sure, but perhaps maybe a couple of them arrived. If so, thank you very much for joining us. And we may or may not have a couple of people joining us via Zoom as well. There were several actors involved in the film that Michael and Theo made that wanted to join. I'm not sure if they're on the call yet, but they may come on shortly. Oh, and we do have an actor from the film as well. Rufino, come on up as well, yes. Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Joe, you want to come?
And Joe Dupree also, so. So as an organization, my name's Kurt Lidke, by the way, I'm board chair of Klamath Film. We review every single film that we get submitted for the film festival. This year we received the documentary that we just saw, Modoc Nation, and we also helped with development of the film This Is Their Land, a narrative short film about the peace negotiations during the Modoc Wars of the 1870s that was shot April of last year down in the Tule Lake area. And we thought it would be really fascinating to have a discussion surrounding these two films about historic documentary and Hollywood perception of historic events, as well as to detail some of the Modoc Nation experience and the Modoc Wars as well. I'm sure we could come up with a countless list of films that have been created based on historic events, and it becomes dramatized for effect, and stories get changed. If the film gets really popular, people know the history based on the movie, not on what actually happened. And I'm hoping that we can maybe educate a little bit today to better understand the Native American experience. And so we will touch on the This Is Their Land film, but also we should introduce our other guest. Rufino is one of the actors that is in the film This Is Their Land that we will see in a little while. And Joe here, you played a huge role in This Is Their Land, making sure that it was as accurate as possible, which I greatly appreciate. What was your role specifically?
Language collaborator. I helped out working on the Modoc language for the film.
Fantastic. The film that we're going to see, I find it would have been so easy to just make the entire thing in English. But the great effort was taken to utilize the language as often as possible in the film that we will see at 3 o'clock. First of all, I would like to open this up for conversation in terms of, I'm a filmmaker as well, and there's a saying in filmmaking, and I'm sure a lot of our filmmakers who are in the audience know this, of killing your darlings, which is that in the course of filmmaking, you may have a script, a story you want to tell, and then in the interest of time, things have to be cut. What was perhaps missing from either the Modoc Wars or the Modoc Nation experience in that film that we feel is vitally important that maybe an audience should know? Anyone want to chime in on that?
I guess, Waklisi Geosasas on Laminawatch Ditchwaitis. So, good day, hello, my name is Thunderhorse. My Christian name is Taylor Tupper. And I also just said hello, I'm really glad to be here. I'm honored to be asked to be a part of this panel. I am a member of the Klamath Tribes of Oregon, Klamath, Modoc, and Yahuskan Paiute people. And I'm also a descendant of people that was exiled to Oklahoma through Bogus Charlie, Scarface Charlie, and a lot of the others that you see that were in the film. And Hy Robbins, my great-grandfather, who was born in Oklahoma and returned in 1909 from the Oklahoma Indian Agency and settled here in the Langell Valley and Sprague River. First, I want to just say thank you to the elders and the people that I see in the office or in the audience, Georgine and Kathy, and one of our extras, the Wrights, that came. It's really important that we have these panels and these discussions, and we recognize the people and the council members that are here. I believe I seen Gail earlier. It's hard to see when the lights are on you. So I just wanted to say thank you because it's about protocol and about being a member. I was asked to be a member of the board, Klamath Film Festival, and I really thank Kurt for all of his work that he does. He's a super hard worker. He wears a lot of hats, and he brought this all together and started to bring this information back to fruition. And one of the things that I can sit up here as a Modoc Indian and represent myself, and I can talk about being an individual tribal member of the Klamath, Modoc, and Yahuskan people, or the Paiute people. But I don't represent the tribe. That would be out of protocol for me to speak on behalf of the tribe. The only ones that can do that according to our Constitution and our bylaws is our governing body and our elected officials. So if there's something to that aspect, then I'd have to defer that way. But since we're talking about the film and the Modoc Nation film, I didn't have any part in that production. I felt it was a really good piece. I seen a few discrepancies, a few things that we probably, government to government, starting to set those protocols. I've always believed that as a descendant of the Modocs that were exiled, a direct descendant of most of the tribe people that are represented in the Modoc War, that we have to come back together as a people, and we should be doing that as a government to government body. So that lies within that aspect. And meeting Rufino and Michael and the producer and Joe, I hope everybody stays for the This Is Their Land for such a short piece to put everything that was written, and they took the writings of Jeff Riddle and the consultation from one of our elders that's here in the audience, Debbie Riddle, and another Modoc elder, Chiwa James, myself, and Hava Florendo put us in contact with the people that were doing that from just work. Everything is intertwined. I believe that Creator God puts everybody in the same room at the same time. And it's a true blessing to be able to know Michael and just to listen to his reasoning why he put this together. I don't know that anything was missed in such an impactful, small 15-minute piece. Sure. I felt like the way that it was rolled out, and when you hear the Klamath or the Modoc language being spoke and the Klamath language being spoke, it's almost fluent. And I was talking to Rufino about that. It actually brought tears to my eyes to hear that, because I believe this is the only film that has brought the language of our people back in history.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Ryan, being a military historian, the film that we just watched did touch on the Modoc Wars for a segment specifically. Is there an aspect of the Modoc Wars that perhaps was missing from that, or that we should better understand the greater perspective of the Modoc Wars and the consequences that came out of that
Yeah, so I think a lot of times what's missing is I'd say between 1870 and 1872, the efforts that were made to prevent the war from happening. So A.B. Meacham, who was high up in government at the time, and he was one of the peace commissioners later on during the war. So A.B. Meacham, he really advocated for a Modoc reservation in around Lost River, so just about 2 miles of east of present-day Merrill. So really called for they wanted a 6 square mile reservation to be centered at what's known as Stone Bridge or Natural Bridge. So he advocated to the point where he was fired from his position and removed. General Canby, who was the commander of the Department of the Columbia at the time, up in Fort Vancouver, again, he advocated. He offered suggestions on how to avoid conflict, and the big suggestion was this 6 square mile reservation for the Modoc people at Stone Bridge. John Fairchild, a lot of the prominent local settlers also advocated for the Modocs to remain in the Lost River area, and unfortunately, the kind of the push of the railroad barons and the land barons at the time, all the people that really advocated for this reservation, and all their calls were fell on deaf ears because, again, that it was just too much power in the railroad, especially the Oregon and California Railroad, and the land barons to get that land in that area. So, again, I think that's a lot. It's typically missing is the effort made to try to prevent the conflict in the first place.
Thank you, Ryan. We do also have Roman Zaragoza is joining us via Zoom. Hello, Roman. We can't see you, but hey, there you are. Hello, sir. Roman was also an actor in This Is Their Land as well. So we're having a bit of a reunion here with the people that were involved. Yeah.
That's so cool.
I should also remind the audience, and it's wonderful to see so many people here. We have a microphone there and a microphone there. If you have a question for our panel, please do head up to a microphone and feel free to speak.
Could I ask one question? Kurt, right here.
Yeah. Hey.
Sorry. This actually, just very quickly, is a fact that kind of stuck with me. Hi, everyone. My name is Rufino. Good afternoon, evening. I still think it's morning. This is a fact that I heard while we were doing This Is Our Land. You might know this, and I could be corrected on this, but one thing that I understood about the money that was spent in fighting the war, that it was actually analyzed that the U.S. government would have saved a lot more money if they gave the reservation to the Modoc Nation than fighting the war. But they decided to fight instead. Am I correct in that statistic?
So, right, I've seen that study before. The 6 square miles, 3,600 square acres or whatever it is. If you look at the value, it was like $5,000 for the whole land. But really, unfortunately, the Oregon and California Railroad was surveyed in 1869, and how it works is railroads were extremely expensive to build. Like 1 mile cost as much as like the Empire State Building to build a railroad. So how the railroads paid for the construction was the government would give them, for every mile they built, the government would give them 20 square miles of land to subdivide and sell to homesteaders. And the way that they surveyed the railroad down from Portland through the Willamette and Rogue Valley, then across from about Eagle Point over into the Klamath Basin here. Of course, Tule Lake was there at the time, and so there was a very, very small stretch of land where this railroad was going to be built, and went right through that proposed reservation. So, if you look at sheer value of the land, it was, again, less than $5,000 land. But looking at the grand scheme of these railroad barons and land barons, we're talking multi-million-dollar plan to bring this railroad and settlement to the land, to this area.
it is interesting as a student of history as well to look back on the Modoc Wars conflict, which it was just down the road from where we're at. It was down in the lava beds. You could make a day trip this afternoon and go experience it for yourself during our film festival here, of the military experience that ended up being so much bigger than what the U.S. Army was expecting, right? And so much more of a resilient fight than what they were anticipating. The film that we just watched, Modoc Nation, talked about the brigadier general being killed and like the highest ranking officer in like U.S. military history or something dying, or am I getting that off?
In the Indian Wars, yes.
Okay, yeah. But just like the overall toll and the amount of resources that the U.S. Army had to put into this as opposed to what they were anticipating, right? Vast contrast there. Do we have questions up here? Please walk up to the microphones. We'd love to hear from you.
Hi. Thank you very much for your effort in bringing this Modoc resettlement to our attention. But what I felt was missing from the movie itself, and I know you don't want criticism, but I need to know, what states did they travel through to get to Oklahoma? Well, California. And you got states after states. There was a reason only 68 people survived. What was the hardship that was neglected from this film? My first question, and my second question was, where is Mr. Gamby, General whatever, title, buried? Thank you.
So General Canby's buried in Indianapolis at Crown Cemetery.
And just to reiterate, thank you for that question. And there's several books that, and two of the books that I recommend that people read, and Chiwa James's Modoc, The Tribe That Wouldn't Die, and Jeff Riddle's book, The Modoc War. But you're absolutely right. It's really hard to put into film. You know, you can do 5 hours of film and it cuts down to 10 minutes, and Michael and the directors and some of the writers can attest to that. You know, but really it's true. And they don't talk about, like, you know, we lose sight of the fact that it wasn't just the 4 that were hung that day and beheaded, and the initial trying to break the spirit of the people by having Captain Jack's daughter and family and all their families watch that piece, watch them be hung, see their heads put on those poles out in Fort Klamath area, and then up until the moment the other 2 Native Americans one was shipped off, they were shipped off to San Francisco, to Alcatraz, and they didn't tell their families where they were going, and they were put on these train and rail cars, some of the children with no shoes and shackles, no food, no provisions. And if you've been around here or been out to Oklahoma and know the severity of the weather in the winters, that's why they didn't survive. And you can do further investigation and reading in those books of how they froze to death, how the majority of them broke and died because of a broken heart. They just couldn't fathom what was happening to them. And so that's why we still, here within the Klamath tribes and the Modoc people, we uphold these ceremonies, these things that take place within our behavioral health, our tribal government. We try to maintain that through our behavioral health and social services, because it's true, that is generational trauma, and we're still dealing with it today. But yeah, I would recommend reading those 2 books. It does give in detail, and hopefully with this piece that Michael wrote and directed, then this will pick up that and they'll become a full feature film. I always believe that the Modoc War should have a full feature film, and this is part of that process.
We have another question from the audience over here.
Well, I'll ask 2. You mentioned a couple of books there. 4 or 5 years ago, I read Spirit in the Rock, and that struck me as a very compelling book, and I just wanted to hear your comments on the reliability of that. The other question goes to something that I'm very curious about, and that is language and culture, and how much is known about your language and what it tells us about tribal life in this area. Thank you.
So yeah, Spirit in the Rock, that was written by Jim Compton, who grew up here in Klamath Falls, went on to, I think he was a Rhodes Scholar at Cambridge, and worked for PBS. He was a city councilman for the city of Seattle for many years. That was his passion late in life, was to write this book about the Modoc War. And he came, and I was able to spend several days with him. I know he spent several days with Debbie Riddle as well during his time here. And that's really where spending time with him is really where I got my insight of the role of Ben Holiday and the Oregon and California Railroad, and how it really caused. I mean, that was really the root cause of the war. Was that. So that's one of my favorite books. Chihuahua James's book is one of my favorites. Modocs in Their War. Jeff Riddle's book, The Indian History of the Modoc War. Those are all really good books.
And regarding your language question, we will refer to Joe here.
Yeah, so my understanding that question was, how is the language being preserved? Is that correct?
Chuck, your question was, how is the language being preserved and carried on, correct?
Well, a little more than that. It was how much has been recovered or salvaged, and what it may teach us about the lives of people at that time.
It's a very loaded question. So I'll start with Klamath Modoc Mukluk is probably one of the most documented languages around in our area. We had one of the biggest works was done by Albert Gatchett in the 1870s, doing lots of field work with a number of troublesome tribes in Oregon and California. It was his first fieldwork assignment with the Bureau of American Ethnology. And so spent a lot of time on the reservation, and also spending time learning language from Modoc prisoners of war before heading out to Oregon, California, to hang out with people who couldn't leave the reservation. So it's considered a huge work in linguistics broadly, and a lot of people recognize Albert Gatchett's name from working in a lot of different tribes. And he started under what's the name? Von Humboldt over in Berlin and Bern. So there's lots of stuff is done on our language, and there's more recently. There's been more work done in the 50s and 60s by M.A.R. Barker, born Philip Barker, till he converted to Islam. And then throughout the last 30 plus years, we've had active revitalization programs, including Head Start programs, high school programs. I'm a product of the culture camp curricula. My mentors here, apprentices of the masters who've since passed on. So there's lots of documentation and there's lots of resources, but getting together the means and having the space for people to have community is the difficult part. Because a lot of times people treat language and culture like it's like toppings on something, not part of daily practice. And a lot of people have difficulties between bills, rent, kids, etc., just having that time to practice. So there's lots going on for that, and we have in the process of developing a language department with the Klamath tribes, and Modoc Nation of Oklahoma is looking at a language program development. So I hope that answers a lot of that.
Terrific, thank you. We have another question over here, correct?
Yeah, this is for the actors. What was some of the research and preparation going into portraying this historical conflict?
Sorry, I gotta laugh a little bit about that. Just because you're about to watch a film that for me is very dear to my heart, and I had the honor and privilege of being able to work with a fantastic group of people. And when I got casted for this, they informed me, okay, we want you to learn the Modoc language. Great, awesome, I'm ready. How much time do I got? 10 days. Yeah, and Mike, he's like, cause I'm like, no, seriously, how many? Like 10 days. Roman, we had that conversation. I remember. I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, you got 10 days. I'm like, okay. So with that being said,
plus a 12-hour drive with me on the way up here.
Yeah, that helped a lot. But one of the beautiful things, and I appreciate Roman, Theo, Mike, all the producers, Taylor, Deborah, was the fact, Joe, I had a family to help me with preparing for the role. I could not have done it without him at all. And so Joe spent hours with us in those 10 days. All the actors who were speaking the Modoc language learned from him. Taylor would send me recordings of some songs that she knew and some verses, and reviewed a lot of my pronunciation. And Deborah referred me to a lot of books, Chiwo James' book, and in those 10 days, I was in my apartment just reading, listening. I had no life for 10 days, and I was fine with that because I knew the film was something bigger than me, way bigger than me. So it was just doing a Joaquin Phoenix and just staying in a room for 10 days and coming out and like, oh, sepkecha, tichi, yeah. And I was like, oh, wow, it's coming out. But again, the preparing was founded and grounded through the family that I ended up meeting finally. So.
And I'm not sure, Roman, if you could unmute. I swear we did a Zoom call this morning and everything worked. We had sound coming through, but I'm not sure if we're hearing you or not. So unmute if you want to comment on that as well. We can hear you.
All right. Yes. What's up, y'all? How you doing? Hey.
Would you also like to comment on that question regarding preparation for This Is Their Land?
Sure. You'll see in the film that I have like one line, and to be able to perform in this film. But I was primarily the producer on this film, and I have such respect for our amazing actors because they worked so hard in such a short amount of time with the amazing Joseph Dupree. And I learned literally like one line, and it took me days to get that one line down. So we'll see. Rufino has a little bit more than what I had. So yeah, it's amazing. Hats off to them, and then just really bringing that emotion to this film. I'm just so proud of them. I'm proud of this whole team.
I just want to reiterate too. Roman is being very modest because he played such a large role in bringing us together. He is one of the first ones that reached out to the Klamath tribes, to Deb, myself, and at that time I was working as the public relations manager for the Klamath tribes. And, you know, at that time it was right in the middle of COVID, and we're trying to handle all this and dynamics and people coming together and all the things that they had to do to get rid of, to make sure everybody on set. And this young man is a great actor, and he didn't quite let you know that he's featured in the film Ghost now, and so that's why he couldn't be a TV show, and he couldn't be here because he's in Canada. But he reached out, and because he knew somebody that he was working with over at the Shakespearean Festival, that's how everything, all the dynamics started, and got us in touch with Michael O'Leary, and then the ball just started rolling. So I'm so glad to see that he's on the panel today because he is instrumental in that. Thank you, Roman.
Thank you for joining us, Roman. Appreciate it. And then that segues really well with Michael and Theo here as director and producer of This Is Their Land. There's been a lot of Western films made. There's been a lot of films made on historic period pieces. But your film is unique amongst a lot of them in that it really tried to go the extra mile to incorporate correct language and show a perspective that isn't one-sided, which is way too common in the history of Hollywood. Would be a whole separate conversation of all the things that Hollywood has done to whitewash history. But in making a film about a historic event related to the Modoc Wars, how important was it for you two, from the production and directing side, to make sure that you really get the story right from the Native American experience?
Yeah, I mean, it was very important. When we're talking about this, part of the question of actors being prepared, when I cast everyone, I instantly was like, all right, I want a one-on-one meeting, and I'm just going to walk you through the history of these people for each character and kind of give them a base of historical knowledge right away. And there was always pushes. I was working with the school because we were students at the time we were making this, and a lot of times there were professors that wanted to change the history to make it more dramatic or things, and I would always push back. And I had somebody say they wanted Jack to die in the second Battle of the Stronghold, which is very much not what happened. And there was always that kind of fight for this, and I always wanted to make sure that the movie was, accessible to audiences from all backgrounds, and I never wanted to take words out of Jack's mouth, and that was a lot of this discussion of how much we were going to include the language. Ultimately, we made the decision that even though Jack would have only spoken his own language, we were like, well, Jack's going to speak English in scenes where there's other English-speaking characters, so that the audience never has words taken out of Jack's mouth and connects more with someone like Canby than with the characters we're seeing. But in scenes where there's all Modoc characters, we're fully in the language and get to see all of this. And I really pushed for us to shoot here. And that was always very important to me. Taylor said that Modoc War always has deserved a feature, and it has a very bad one made in the 50s that was shot in Sedona, Arizona, and it doesn't look like this at all, obviously. And I was like, there's just no place like this. And to tell this story, it had to be in the land, and it had to be a part of this world. And it was a hard thing for Theo to get done.
Yeah, just to add on this, when Michael first told me the story, I didn't really understand it until we came here and I was in the lava beds and actually seeing the place. And that's when I really understood everything. And when he told us that he wanted to shoot here, we were like, yeah, you're insane. It's the middle of COVID. It's 12 hours away. How are we going to bring trucks with gear, and all our 30 people crew, and where are they going to sleep? Where are we going to eat? What's going to happen? But when we did make it, and once we did film here and we're done with it, it was just a different experience. It was like, yeah, as Rufino said, it was like a family, and also it was just, the film is, the land is just so important to the film and to the audience to be looking at. Nowhere looks like it, as Michael said. We scouted a place in the, what was it?
In the middle of the, oh God.
I forgot. The Death Valley?
The Mojave Desert.
Yeah.
We're out somewhere
We're in a cave there.
But
Yeah.
it's not the same.
Really not the same. And it really brought, I feel like the land really brought life to our movie, and that's why it was so important for us to film here.
Yeah, and we had suggestions of maybe we could film it in the Vasquez Rocks, which is a very famous Western location, and I was like, there's no way. And Jeff Okabayashi, who's a mentor of mine, who you've probably seen his work. He's the first assistant director of a lot of Marvel movies nowadays. And I was like, hey, I want to shoot it here. How doable is that? And he was like, that's insane on a student budget. There is no way. And he was like, but if you do it, it'll be awesome.
And we should say, for context purposes, Ramon and Theo and Michael, how they got involved in the This Is Their Land film that we're about to see was that it was a senior project from Cal State Northridge, is that right?
Northridge.
Correct. And so they got in touch with our organization, Klamath Film. There were numerous Zoom calls to figure out how do we do this and where do we do this and what do we do, and equipment and all that, all the logistics on top of COVID. But when I visited the set, April of last year was when this was filmed, I was really glad to see that, for one, it was outside of the white actors that were playing white roles, it was all Native American actors in Native American roles, first of all, which is something that, again, we haven't always seen in the history of Hollywood. And that there were tribal representatives on site throughout filming as well. And certainly, for language as well, it would have been really easy just to make the entire film in English. And that's been done many times over. But to go that extra mile to incorporate the actual language. And we saw in the Modoc Nation film that we just saw how important it is for even just saying, hello, how are you? What kind of impact that has. Perry Choctu was up there talking about what an impact that makes. To utilize language, and I know, Joe, you have, you were very prominent in making sure that happened. How important was that to the crew involved, and This Is Their Land, and Roman, feel free to chime in on this as well, that it got it correct?
I would love to chime in real quick if that's cool. First of all, also want to shout out Madeline Cady, who's our other producer, who was freaking amazing and monumental in making this film happen. originally the script was all in English, and I remember I was like, Michael, what if we had this in the language? I think that would be like so much more powerful. Like, yeah, I don't know how to do that. And from that conversation to where we are now, I'm so just grateful that we were able to connect with Joseph Dupree, and yeah, I think it's so important because language revitalization is such a huge subject in Native communities, and it's something that we need to really talk about. And I think that's why, like, after seeing the movie Gray, if anyone saw it on Hulu, there's like a whole other, there's a whole dubbed version you can watch in YouTube, and which is so powerful. And I think there's more that can be done in that regard. And so for me, I wanted to make sure, like in regards to your other question, that we were engaging with members of the tribe, descendants of the people who are in this story that we're telling. So, yeah.
And I just want to say, I'm never going to forget, there was a moment, one of the first days we were shooting, we were in the caves, we were in Lava Beds National Monument where we were lucky enough to shoot. Obviously, thank you to the, the people who work there who let us go and shoot in the caves. It was also a difficult process. But, we were in the caves and we had like the first lines of dialogue in that language. And I just remember Joe turning to me when it was done and being like, "This is awesome. We are speaking native language in the land where it belongs." And it was incredible. I mean, it was a scary prospect every step of the way to include the language, to find Joe, to incorporate it, to have Rufino and all the actors learn it in like 2 weeks, like he's saying. But it was an incredibly powerful addition to the film, and it really has changed the way that the movie breathes and plays, and I really deeply love it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that because of the short turnaround, I remember when I first got the first email, and then Chairman Gentry had deferred it to me because of what was going on with COVID. And there wasn't time for vetting of anything. And it's really a long process when you get into government works with government to government relations to, like, first of all, if the tribe was going to endorse it, they would have needed to see the script, hear the script, meet all the people, come before the panel. We weren't meeting in person. So then it kind of became how can we help this young crew? And they were like, are they out of Hollywood? And I was trying to just do my best through learning Zoom at the time, and get on this first Zoom meeting. And, I always have to pray about these things. And I talked to Debbie, talked to Chiwa, and Chiwa's always, and my father, my late father, Rayson, he always said, hey, if you know something or you think you can help, do your best. Like, if they're coming here to tell your story, you shouldn't shun them and throw them away. You should check it out and see. It doesn't mean you have to endorse it, but do the best you can so that they know the best. And these young, this is his thesis, and he come here as a young boy and went through the lava beds on his own with his father and had that dream, Michael did, to always do this. He's never moved away from it, and even his work now in grad school, still putting that time and effort in what he wants this to become. I was really honored to be, it wasn't endorsed by the tribe because we just didn't have time. Those types of projects and those needs take at least 6 months. It's a long process, and our governing body isn't able to do that work in a shorter time. But I'm really glad with what came to fruition with Debbie being on site. Like, even the days when I was just working, Debbie went down there and, she scold him if something didn't go right. She would scold him and tell him, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. Like, that's not what would have happened. So I just appreciate that, and I appreciated Joe's time because he was right there in the cave. If they said something wrong, they could cut and restate it.
Joseph, do you want to talk about your role in making sure things were accurate?
I mean, yeah, just to start as getting an email. It's on?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Okay, good. Just getting emails asking for assistance with this has been like, that's kind of, big question already. Like, what's the process? Like, what are you trying to do? Because a lot of people have seen movies where it's like subtitled, or it's like subtitled badly, or it's dubbed bad, all kinds of ways. And so We just want to know more about it. Like, what are we looking at? And so part of it was just the technical bit. Like, you know, I have a language background, linguistics, and we talked about, like, you know, these scripts. So it's like, you know, first thing is like, you know, give me the line, and then what does it mean? You know, like, what does it affect? So if it says like, if someone says like they're going, it doesn't mean like character exit left. Like, tell me what this does in the script. So after that, we could, you know, field out how it sounds, because we can say things different ways. And so we'd be on the Zoom calls and be like, we'd have to go through some of these lines and be like, all right, here's how it sounds. We weren't even to meetings yet. And so that was good. Now, if we got to the flow of what we thought would sound like, then we could go for a word by word, a piece by piece of language breakdown. Right. And so then I would do the linguist thing, and I would do what's called a 4-line gloss, where it's like you have it in the language, then you break it down all the bits of the parts of the language. Then under each of those parts of the language you broke down, you give a literal, as best you can, translation for each of those parts. And then under it is what's called free translation. And so I told Michael and everyone, I was like, look, so I've given you the language, we've broken it down, I've told you what each of the parts mean, and for this free translation, I'm going to give you what I would say because I grew up speaking English. And so you get my special, you know, flavor of Chiloquin English. This is the translation. Like, so between these 4 lines, you can subtitle it. You have all the knowledge you need to responsibly subtitle. And so that was just to get into the technical bit. That's not to mention like the actors coming, like getting on Zoom and listening and just looking at the writing and just being like, okay, I accept this writing system for what it is. I'm not going to question how it's spelled. And like, as someone who's doing language revitalization or working in linguistics, people care how languages are spelt, right? And so a big part of what we were doing is just getting these lines down, just really being into it, like emoting, and spending time just being like, don't try to sound like me. After a while, you'll sound like you. Just say it till it's your voice, no longer sounding like me, because we all try to mimic who we know, right? We try to copy their accent. Don't copy my accent. I'm from Chiloquin. Like, I talk different. So when we're talking language, eventually we're going to say enough times where you're going to put in your emotions. And that was what I really enjoyed, because when you see the film, like, there's all these parts where they're in a cave or they're speaking in language, and I'm off behind the camera or off hidden in some corner or crevice. And so all the sounds that are captured in the cave, every step is the same that you heard in the cave on the day of with their lines. So it's really weird, because it's like an echo of memory now when we do it. And everyone did so good, just like taking the short time that they had to just dedicate their like persona into it. So that's what really makes it, I think, for me, is just seeing just everyone put themselves into language. And the fact that we had this documentary before y'all have the background to like get all the in, right? So there's like little one-liners that I was asking my friend's family, was like, can you get trauma from translating? Because we were like, so you want me to be Modoc specific, one, right? But you want me to look up, figure out Peace Commission, right? You want me to feel like, what are we going to do with all these? I'm like, of course, we have old documents. Let me figure these out. And so we're getting into those old documents of like from the 1890s and things like that to make sure that we're using Modoc specific language and that, you know, those word differences are understood.
Yeah, and you know, when we're talking about Joe's work too, you know, Joe kind of helped rediscover the script in his translation. I mean, you have lines that I wrote out in English that didn't translate exactly, and Joe would find new phrases to help add to them. There's a very powerful moment in the film where Jack in the script just says, "They are my people" in English, and Joe went into translation, worked on it, and ended up with this very powerful moment where it's like, "They are my people, also we are tied together." And Joe kind of helped to add phrases and things that added to the script. I mean, he's done a lot of work on this project.
I would like to ask, and this is speaking more of a generality, not specific to the Klamath tribe experience or the Modoc tribe experience, but as a European mutt who has no Native American heritage, but a student of history and a lover of culture, I always want to know how I can be a better neighbor, be a better friend, be a better supporter, be a better ally. What can I do outside of educating myself on understanding the full scope of history and culture and be supportive of that to be a better ally to my Native American neighbors here in Klamath County? Anyone want to chime in on that?
I'll say something. My ancestors, they're from Central and South Americas. Unfortunately, from my family, it took a lot of digging to find out my ancestors. A lot of digging, just I'm sure as it is for many natives and many people who have been disconnected from their people. And especially with the film that came out, the educator, she says something that really touched me, where it was, it's beautiful to know that you belong to people. And so one thing I would say, just anyone who wants to be an ally for anything, is to have an open heart. Have an open heart. Be curious, not presumptive. And have a conversation. It's okay to have a conversation. We got to have a conversation in order to be able to go forward in discourse of humans in general. But I believe if you could come in with an open heart, curiosity, and genuinely, sincerely want to be able, like, hey, brother, hey, sister, where are you from? Where your family from? Like, what do you, like, my family's from so-and-so. When I believe coming from a genuine place, it makes such a big impact with communities coming together. So that's just my take.
We have about 5 minutes before we're going to start This Is Their Land, so I want to make sure our panelists all get a chance to give some final words here. Roman, why don't we start with you? Your final thoughts, either about This Is Their Land or anything that we've discussed today.
I just want to, express my gratitude to everyone that's involved in this project. Taylor, Debbie, Chiwa, Joe, our whole team. Shout out Michael, Theo, and my whole for y'all being there. It's so cool. And I'm sad I'm not there, but I hope y'all enjoy the film. So much love was put into making this, and I'm just grateful I can do it.
Thank you, Roman. Ryan, do you have any final thoughts you would like to share?
I'm really looking forward to viewing the film, and I said this when they premiered the PBS documentary here as well. So in 1954, the way I understand it, this is where Drumbeat was premiered, and so it's always good to kind of right the wrong of that movie that came out in 1954 about the Modoc War with something a little bit more historically accurate, or a lot more historically accurate.
Taylor?
I want to just say, Sepkecha, thank you to everybody. Thank you to these wonderful humans for making this. And one of the things that is always most important is, before what you had mentioned, is don't always assume, this is my own personal opinion, don't assume that the conflict that's going on and has been going on for many, many years within my tribe is who we are. We have to be that because we also believe that it's spiritual law. We're taught spiritually in all of our teachings and with the elders that we're placed here by Creator Gomolkumps. And if we're not well, this community can't be well, because that's why we were put here. So we can't stop upholding our treaty rights, and we will never stop doing that. Just like Mr. Fallis said for the Modoc Nation, we have to be tough and strong. But we're here also to build those partnerships and build those community alliances, and to do these things and to incorporate these types of things. And a special thank you to Joe, because he took that time and now he's become a master linguist. He's teaching, he's a teacher, and much like his family and the Hills and the Wrights that are here and the Hatchers, and I think that's, I don't have my glasses on, so I can barely see who's sitting out there. We have a lot of people, a lot of history in this, and I just want to say thank him for taking on that role, because we always get put in these conflicts of, should we do that? Are we going to get in trouble? But, you can't get in trouble if you're doing the right thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. We have just a minute or two left, so real quick, Rufino, any final thoughts?
Subkecha for everyone here to watch the film, for being here for the festival. Subkecha to Kurt and all the staff to making this possible. Every human being that's on the stage. Roman, I love you. And just thank you in general, and I'm grateful to be here, and it's a privilege.
And I just quickly want to add to the list of people we've been thanking up here, the Sconchin family, Lahoma, Lauren, who talked to us, to, everyone who came out and supported us, the Wright family, the extras we had on this set. It was an incredible process. I've been trying to make a movie about the Modoc War for 7 years, and it's really crazy to get to see it on the screen today, so thank you.
Is today the world premiere, by the way?
Yes, it is.
Today is the world premiere.
Yeah.
And just real quick too, what we're gonna watch is just a tiny little fragment of the whole, events that happened. And as we were saying, we would love to make it bigger, and it's been in the works for so many years, and it's really important to us. But it is just the amount of time that we could cover in the amount of time that we had of 15 minutes. Anyway, yeah. Thank you for coming.
I just end on the question about being a good neighbor. One of the things like that, a lot of things is, you're taking an opportunity to learn a lot about Modoc peoples today. And that's always important to, understanding folks. But the most important thing you can do as people, as a tribe, as our neighbors, is really ground yourself in your own position, understand what brought you to where you are today, and what things you're committed to that can align with or go against tribal interests. Be really open and honest with yourself about what you're doing here in our land, in our community, and when you're interacting with us, and that's the best way to be a neighbor. So most of Ketchamash.
Kurt,
How about a big hand for our panel here?
and one final comment. One thing we didn't get to talk about was Rainbow. She plays Wainima in the film that's coming. That's a several great grandmother to Debbie, my 5 great grandmother, and other people that are here in the audience. But Rainbow, I thought she did a phenomenal job, and I just wanted to mention her. And even though she didn't get her horse riding scene, you'll see that the horses at least made the film.
Terrific. So with that, let's see the world premiere of This Is Their Land. However, with all of our feature films, we do posters for the directors. The director is in Indiana. So we have this poster that we would like to give to the Modoc tribes members that are present. So, Ken, this is for you, sir. Thank you, panel. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you, audience, for being a part of that fascinating discussion. Thank you, Ramon.